I keep losing to someone who's been doing what I do for half as long as me and who isn't even half as good as me, all because they post more on social media than I do. Being good at your job just isn't good enough anymore, and I want to be really clear about what I mean because it's easy to misunderstand. I'm not saying that being good doesn't matter, because it matters more than ever, but what I'm saying is that competence by itself is no longer viable. And that shift has created a problem for people who've built their careers on being excellent. In this video, I'm going to break down the invisible filter that's determining who gets trusted and hired before anyone even looks at their work, so you can make sure you're passing that filter instead of staying invisible. So make sure you watch the entire video. The old game. A lot of professionals are still operating on an old assumption, which is if you're excellent at what you do, that excellence will eventually surface and people will find you, reputation will spread, and the work will speak for itself. And that assumption used to be reasonable. If you were one of a smaller number of people doing a specific thing, quality stood out. If you were clearly better than the alternatives, people noticed. Word traveled, and you didn't have to explain yourself that much. But that's not the environment anymore. It's not like you're the only blacksmith in a village or like the shoemaker. People aren't just choosing between 1, 2, or 3 options. They're choosing between dozens and sometimes hundreds. And most of those options look roughly competent from the outside. So being good hasn't disappeared. It's just no longer that obvious. And if you're someone who takes your work seriously, like if you have standards, if you care about the craft, this is where things can start to feel off. And I've been there. It's annoying when you see less capable people winning attention, getting the opportunities, building their reputation, and you start to have this kind of quiet resentment start to creep in. But here's a mistake, is we sometimes start to assume that quality no longer matters, but that's not what's happening. What's actually happening is recognition and competence have kind of decoupled. They used to move together, now they're separate layers. And most people are stuck on the first layer, competence, and are waiting for the second layer to kind of arrive automatically. It won't. I see this constantly with people who are genuinely excellent at what they do. Thoughtful people, people with standards, people who take their craft seriously, and they stay invisible anyway. The pattern I see most often is hesitation around being seen, not because they can't explain what they do, but because they don't want to come across the wrong way. They don't want to sound braggy, they don't want to feel performative, they don't want to cheapen their work by talking about it too much. And that hesitation makes sense. It comes from having standards, but while they're hesitating, someone else is showing up. And more times than not, that person isn't better. They're just louder, or more comfortable being visible, or less concerned with how they're perceived. And that person gets chosen not because they're more skilled, but because they're familiar. So the question becomes, how are people actually deciding who to trust now? It used to be like way more direct. You'd look at past work, you'd talk to referrals, you'd evaluate competence through outcomes. That still exists, but it's no longer the first filter. Now there's like a pre-filter. Before someone looks at your work, they're asking quieter questions. Have I seen this person before? Do they seem established? Do they appear serious about what they do? And do I have any sense about how they think? And honestly, will I like working with them? Visibility answers those questions, not perfectly, not necessarily accurately every time, but efficiently. And efficiency matters when people are overwhelmed with options. This is why consistent, thoughtful visibility carries so much weight now. Not because it proves you're the best, but it signals legitimacy. It suggests you're not hiding. It suggests you're invested in your work enough to make it understandable to other people. This is where authority gets misunderstood. Authority isn't about asserting your expertise. It's not about telling people how good you are or talking about your credentials or titles, or at least not primarily. The way I look at it is authority now comes from exposure to judgment. Letting people see how you think, how you reason through problems, how you make trade-offs, and what you emphasize and what you ignore. That's why longer form formats work. Podcasts, conversation, extended video, anywhere there's enough room for someone to see your mind at work. And over time, something interesting happens. People start to feel like they know you, not just professionally, but personally too. They get to see that you know your shit and whether or not they would actually enjoy working with you. That familiarity does a lot of work before you ever speak to them directly. So when we talk about being seen, this is where it's important to be precise. Being seen doesn't mean posting constantly. It doesn't mean chasing attention. It doesn't mean becoming a content person or playing an algorithm game. You don't have to be following the latest TikTok trends, dancing on camera, degrading yourself, pointing to stuff just for a few likes. It means translating what already exists in your head for your audience. Most professionals already explain their thinking. They just do it more privately, in client conversations and meetings, in one-on-one contexts where the stakes are clear. You should be taking those same explanations and letting them exist publicly. Talking through how you approach your work, what you notice first, what mistakes you see people make, and how you evaluate quality and what good actually looks like from the inside. It's not necessarily like a volume game, it's about clarity. And importantly, it's not about selling either, it's about consistently being valuable. Because when somebody eventually needs what you do, they don't want to start from zero. They don't want to educate themselves all over from scratch. They want to choose someone who feels legible, someone who they've seen think, and that familiarity doesn't really happen by accident. It happens through consistent presence in places where your ideal clients already are. Think about the brands you trust, the people you follow, the businesses you recommend. That repetition creates something psychologists call mere exposure effect. The more you see something, the more familiar it becomes, and familiar feels safer than unknown. But here's what makes this actually work. It's not just showing up consistently, it's showing up consistently with something different to say each time. The pattern recognition comes from seeing your face, your name, your brand in their feed or inbox repeatedly, and that builds the I know this person feeling. But the value comes from the content itself being varied and actually useful. Different angles on the same expertise, different problems addressed, different insights shared. And that combination of consistent presence plus varied value is what actually moved people from just I've seen this person to I trust this person. Because consistency without value is just noise, and value without consistency is a one-time impression that gets forgotten. When you pair them together, you create something more powerful, top-of-mind positioning. So when someone finally has the problem that you solve, you're not competing with dozens of strangers. You're the familiar option who's already demonstrated that they understand the space. I talk to business owners who are frustrated by this reality all the time, and yeah, it honestly is a pain in the ass, but this is part of the game now. It would be way easier if good work just automatically rose to the top. But opting out doesn't preserve integrity, it just preserves invisibility. And invisibility isn't neutral, it has consequences. You can be the best at what you do, but if no one can see how you think, your expertise stays private. And private expertise doesn't compound. It doesn't build trust before you need it. It doesn't create the conditions for people to choose you. It doesn't let your thinking do work while you're not in the room. And that's a trade-off we're navigating right now. Being good still matters, but being visible about how you're good, that's what determines whether people ever find you.